where do shamanism, where do shamanism and Buddhism meet in depth hypnosis? That's a huge subject, and I'll just give a couple of examples of that intersection. In Buddhism, which is, I know, a religion to many people, there are many, many practices for understanding the mind and transforming the processes of the mind. And it really is more of a science of understanding the self than solely a religion. And so it's important to recognize that, because when we're incorporating Buddhism into depth hypnosis, we are not asking people to be adapting to a different religion. It's not a system of belief that we're asking a person to engage in. And that's the same thing. That is also true for when we incorporate aspects of shamanism. And of course, shamanism is the most ancient form of healing and spirituality on the planet. Most cultures that have ever been on the planet have incorporated shamanic practices into their healing practices, their doctoring practices, their problem-solving practices, their ceremonial creation practices. And of course, shamanism is fundamentally an earth-based system. It is a system for drawing the wisdom of the earth into human experience. And there are some very powerful forms of healing within shamanism that you find in almost every culture where shamanism has existed. And of course, it's always very interesting to see this kind of arising of similar practices in different cultures that have never come into contact with each other. And, of course, you always wonder, where is the common root? The common root is the earth, and the way that the earth teaches people how to become more empowered and to heal themselves. So it's a shaman's job to learn how to listen to the earth, and the processes of listening to the wisdom of the earth involve the shaman creating relationships with what in shamanism are called helping spirits, or the powers of nature, in order to be able to effectively address the issues of imbalance that are brought to him or her by the members of the community. So the practices of shamanism are essentially catalytic. You are moving energy fields around in shamanism. And in Buddhism, it's a bit cooler. It's a process of understanding the roots of imbalance. And when you combine those two things, this kind of cool engagement with the understanding of the roots of things, with the more catalytic processes of moving the imbalance out of one system and into another system of balance, you have a very powerful engine for healing. And so, for instance, in depth hypnosis, we work with something called the Four Noble Truths as a diagnostic tool. And the Four Noble Truths are statements from Buddhist practice about the nature of suffering. And the Four Noble Truths state: 1, life is suffering; 2, the suffering is based on aversion, attachment, and ignorance; 3, we can come out of suffering; and 4, we can do this in Buddhism through the following of a set of precepts called the Eightfold Path. And of course, Buddhism would adapt that, and depth hypnosis would adapt that and say, well, you can also come out of suffering by following some of the practices in depth hypnosis. And so, so what would happen, as a depth hypnosis practitioner is working with someone, they would always be asking themselves, what is this person attached to? What are they avoiding? What are the processes in which they are not understanding the true nature of reality? And so, for instance, let's go back to that example that we were using of this woman who was not well taken care of by her parents and was invaded by her siblings on a regular basis. And so the source of her suffering, in this case, could be that she believed that she didn't have the right to not allow someone to invade her space. That she had to allow this with anyone who came her way, and that her only recourse was to hide, as you say, in the smoke screen to get them away from her. Okay, so we have this misapprehension about the nature of reality, and then as we saw, we go back into the source of that misapprehension, back in time, using regression therapy and the tools of soul retrieval to correct that misapprehension by having a different form of power introduced into the place of powerlessness in the form of the adult bringing the child into their heart. And so you have this movement of energy fields happening, this movement of energy and this, catalytic change in the way that the person is holding their energy and how that energy is informing their thought processes. So there are other forms of healing that are drawn from shamanism and depth hypnosis, including power retrieval and energetic interference release. And there's just lots and lots that I could go on about that, but I think that gives you, I hope that answers your question there about the way that shamanism and Buddhism interface in depth hypnosis.